Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Tambellini Group's New Normal in Higher Education. I'm Raechelle Clemmons. I'm a vice president here at the Tambellini Group and also an analyst focusing on higher education trends and emerging technology. So today we'll be talking about whether there's a new normal in IT and institutional strategy, and if we're seeing any shifts in these areas as a result of COVID-19. Joining me for this conversation today is Steve diFilipo. Steve is Chief Technology Officer as well as Chief Innovation Officer for Millersville University in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
So Steve, for a long time, higher ed CIOs have had this kind of strategist versus plumber debate, right? Is IT strategic and should it be treated as such, or is it really just plumbing? So prior to COVID-19, which side do you think was winning that debate and why?
Okay, so before we get into the meat of this, I need to announce for people who don't know me that I tend to be, I perceive my role in having these kinds of conversations, not so much to be right, but to sort of provoke thoughtful discourse and to help others sort of think thoughtfully towards solving problems. So I tend to say things that people go, what did he say? And why did he say that? But it's really to just get people to start thinking. So with that said, the strategist versus plumber conversation has been going on for almost too long. I feel like it's a tired conversation. Prior to COVID, if you look at the numbers coming out of EDUCAUSE and some other organizations like Gartner that are looking specifically at higher ed, the numbers seem to skew based upon where the role sat in the org chart. So if the CIO reported to the provost, they were beholden to the faculty senate and the academic side of the house. If the position reported to the chief financial officer, there was that sort of less than stellar positioning of IT, in my opinion. And then some folks reported to the president. If I remember right, and someone should fact check me, I think less than 50% of the CIOs reported to the president.
I think it was roughly, it changed every year, but it was roughly a third, yeah, give or take.
Yeah, so in my opinion, if you're not sitting at the table and you're not reporting directly to the president, you're not as keenly a strategist. Now, that doesn't mean the individual couldn't think strategically, but it just means that the university or the institution didn't perceive it significantly enough strategically to position it in the org chart in a more influential position.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, prior to COVID, I would say it was more plumber.
Okay, perfect. So with COVID-19, all of a sudden we're seeing technology become extremely important to the continuity of pretty much every institution, certainly in the US, but I'd argue probably on the planet. So we had classes moving online. We saw staff suddenly needing to work remotely. We saw all services moved online. So did this change the debate about technology being strategic in institutions? Or do you think that that will just be viewed in this context of how we plan for COVID-19 and not be a lasting trend?
Great question. And I'm going to frame it a little bit and suggest that depending on how each campus in higher education as a vertical shakes out post-pandemic, then that will influence or inform the conversation around IT as being more strategic or not. So there were clearly some campuses where their technology was not well defined in terms of a business continuity plan. And that's what we were really talking about here. So I know that there were some campuses that this was a seamless move because they had already built out a COOP, continuity of operations plan, business continuity plan, whatever you want to call it, that really was ready for any emergency. So regardless of what the need, so if it's a tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake or something, you have to move off a campus in a heartbeat. I mean, I was on one campus where we were in a significant flight path for landing at a major airport. And we were planning on well, what happens if a plane falls on campus? I mean, you have to think about it. And that's going to happen without any warning.
Right.
Post Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, I did a presentation for EDUCAUSE, and we had 3 weeks to plan for Sandy. I mean, seriously, could you just give me more time? So one of the gentlemen in the audience who I knew was coming from Nebraska, the University of Nebraska, from Mark's shop. And during the presentation, I said, we had 3 weeks to prepare. I said, Dave, how much did you have? And they said they usually get 7 minutes. So I really think that the notion is how prepared were campuses. And so I think there's an awareness to the value of IT, but it's going to be based on the response at each campus. So some campuses are going to be getting held to the fire because they didn't respond well, and someone's going to paint the CIO in a bad position, possibly. I hope that doesn't happen, because it's the campus's responsibility to have a business continuity plan, not IT. So I think that's why I reframe the question, that post-pandemic, we think there's going to be some campuses that aren't going to survive, long term. So what happens to them? And then how do we frame IT or technology as being a part of that demise, or the accelerant to make some campuses excel beyond where they are now and think differently? So that goes to the individual role, the individual person. Yeah. I struggle with the CIO, because there are 4,500 CIOs pretty much across the country, right? Across the vertical. So there's 4,500 different points of view. Somebody much smarter than me looked at the CIO role as being sort of a growing process. So a campus that's not, so it's a maturity index kind of thing. So if a campus has a maturity index around IT that's very nascent, they really need more of a plumber to make sure the operations get put in place. But then 3 or 5 years down the road, they need a CIO with a different set of skills as the maturity index starts to expand and they become more adept at the operations. Now they need somebody that can sort of tie the loose ends together. And then another 3 to 5 years later, they need somebody that's a true strategist. So over time, a campus evolves. I just don't think we have done a smart job as an industry of making those shifts appropriately with staff.
Okay. So, but what you just said is that institutions who were maybe hadn't sort of tackled that plumbing state were caught a little bit unaware in COVID. And I know you started out by saying you like to be controversial, or you can be controversial. So could we argue then that given what we saw with COVID, no matter where you were as an institution, that IT strategy is becoming sort of the new institutional strategy, that you can't really separate the two in the way that we did in the past?
No, but you can. So, and I know you and I have had this conversation offline. So for a long time, I have looked at IT as a box on an org chart. And that's not to demean the value of IT or literally put it in a box. But I also look at technology as a larger construct than information technology department. Right. So the construct of technology is that it touches everything we do on campus. I mean, there are some campuses I've been on where they water the lawn based on detectors that they have that automatically trigger the sprinkler system. Right. So it touches literally every part of a campus. But with the commercialization and commoditization of technology, it doesn't always become the purview of the information technology department. So any SaaS solution rarely requires IT's participation, other than some data integration. Hosted solutions is the same way. So I think that the concept of technology as a strategy becomes a pervasive effort across the campus. And the Department of Information Technology serves a certain purpose around the sort of enterprise level solutions like security and network infrastructure and things of that nature. But so I think you can separate IT and technology strategy and have them be different. And I don't think the CIO always has to be the chief technology strategist on a campus. That should fall to whoever has the motivation, the ability to influence decision making. It could be the president. I'm working with a president right now who's incredibly adept at technology and understands the value of it and pushes the agenda for it across the campus. So okay. I separate the two. So I don't know about post-pandemic how that works out, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we're saying, I think we're saying the same thing. I think it is technology is intrinsically part of institutional strategy. I think where I differ is I think the CIO can and should lead that role or lead that charge. I know we differ on that, but
That's okay.
if you were going to give a CIO or IT leader advice in terms of how to prepare themselves to lead that type of institutional strategy, technology for the institution, or any other leader, a president, a provost, anybody else, what sort of advice would you give them?
Wow. Do you have like a 15-week course I can offer on this?
Maybe. And I know you do that. I mean, you do this advising on, as well, but,
Yeah.
shorthand it for us.
So the shorthand is, wow, there is no shorthand for me. So my first career, I've had 4 careers by choice because basically I get bored easy. So my first career, till I was almost 30 years old, I was a professional touring musician, and I was a drummer. So the drummer's always at the back of the stage, right? Typically, you're not out front. That's where the guitarist or the singer is or whatever. But I learned really early on at a very young age, like before I was 17, that I could completely command a room because I was the drummer. So I could control the tempo, control the volume. I could bring energy to the room. So I learned to lead from behind. So I think that anyone can be a leader and can advance a strategy, and it doesn't have to be from the CIO chair. It can be from any chair. So that's where you and I see sort of differ. So I think the concept of lead from behind, lead from beside, whatever, you don't have to have that title to be able to pull off the influence that's required of a good leader. It's just you have to be forward thinking. You have to understand strategy. More than anything else, I think you just have to believe in yourself. Like, have an insane amount of self-confidence, bordering on arrogance. That I'm okay failing. I'm not afraid to fail, and I'm just going to step up to the plate and swing for the fence. So I think it takes that level of business acumen, political acumen. I'm not a technologist. I have no degree in computer science. I'm a musician, dude, who finds himself in the role of helping colleges and universities across the country, some of the biggest and some of the smallest, define a strategy for technology. And now I'm working with Millersville and doing the same thing. So I think it could be, you can lead from behind, you can lead from confidence, you can lead from ideas. You don't have to be the CIO to pull that off. But if you are the CIO, you need to have that level of self-assurance, a single-mindedness. Jerry Jones, of the owner of the Dallas Cowboys up near where you are,
Yeah.
once said in an interview with Mark Cuban that sometimes you just have to exert your will. And I think that requires that. You have to be able to walk up to the president and say, nah, you're kind of crazy. This is how we should be doing this. And be willing to put your career on the line, because that's what happens sometimes. That's it.
Okay, so wrapping this up and bringing
Trying
it
to
back.
take all this stuff in my head and squeeze it in.
I know, squeeze it into a tiny soundbite in 5 minutes. So bringing this back to the new normal, then, let's think about, how do institutional strategic plans look different in the future with this more, tech strategy is institutional strategy?
Yeah, that's it has to be a culture of technology. So I think things like Office 365 have advanced that. So campuses that have brought in Google, like those big productivity suites, or Office 365, where it becomes incumbent upon everybody to learn how to use Teams, like we're doing right now.
Right.
I think that's helped advance the conversation. Things like digital signage that people seem to like put by the wayside. Things like we just instituted some chatbots. I know that's not particularly innovative in the world, but for some campuses, that's hugely innovative. So just advancing those tool sets will help bring the conversation across the campus, because it's, instituting an artificial intelligence tool set isn't just the purview of IT. Where I think we get a little confused sometimes is that some people put on their Superman t-shirt in the morning and strap on the cape and go out to save their campus. And I'm not so sure that's the role of the CIO. But I think to advance that conversation around strategy, you have to step up to the plate and be willing to, strike out every now and then. Because think about this, a baseball player who only hits the ball a third of the time is considered an amazing baseball player. So I think that's how we start to really move. But it comes from a personal perspective. I know I'm an extrovert, and I know, having been a touring musician, you tend to like, I want the spotlight, can you make that a little brighter and a little whiter for me, please? Not everybody's that way, I get it. But I think it takes that level of being able to push it and advance an agenda and know how to do it without losing your head.
Yeah, so I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert, but I always had a strong vision for what I thought institutions could do, right? So I don't think it takes, to your point, it's not one type of personality, but it is that sort of strength and vision to push it forward.
And I think that's the point. So
Yeah.
I thank you for saying that. So it is that strength of vision. So I just was trying to articulate it differently, but you're right. It's exactly it. If you have the vision, and then you have to figure out a way to execute it.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Well, you heard it here first on the new normal. Swing for the fences, says Steve diFilipo, right? Have a great one. Go big or go home. We'll see you next time.